first start off by thanking the chairman and this committee. This is the second time I've had the honor of sitting on this committee. I'm a guest today because I'm an appropriator, but it really means a lot to us in California that you've taken the time to at least do 2 of these in California. We did one on water a few months back, and now we're doing one on forestry. And the fact that we've got a few members from outside of the state to come out and listen as well is important. The area that I have the honor of representing, we don't have forest fires in that part. And when we hear these stories, and Mr. Turnbull, in your testimony, the letters from these constituents who have lost their family homes are devastating. And we experienced when those fires were happening, obviously we were losing firefighters to come up and help fight some of these fires. But we were struggling with some air quality issues. We were struggling with a lot of issues that were affecting us. I mean, obviously food quality, like the wine grape growers, obviously loss of production if it's not on your solar, but on anything else. But it didn't really hit me until I heard, I think it was Mr. McClintock at some point or Mr. LaMalfa in Washington say, well, all that smoke you're burning are our folks' dreams, businesses, everything they had worked so hard to build. And it really should, I think, affect a lot of people a lot more. It's going to have a devastating impact, obviously, on our health in the valley. It's going to have a devastating impact on our economy in the country. And it's going to have these things that are going to make some real differences. But you've got homes that have been in families for hundreds of years that have burned. Right. And I know that a lot of it's been addressed up until this point where we talk about investment. From Mr. Doherty, he brought up some of how do we attract some of this investment, and I know some of the regulations we've got to struggle with. But what about the next generation? What are we going to do? And I wanted to address this question first off to Mr. White. You served as the chairman of the California Young Farmers and Ranchers Committee. According to the U.S. Department of Ag, the average age of a farmer is 57 years old, which, as I'm getting older, doesn't seem that old. But it's getting there. But we need to recruit and retain young farmers and ranchers. And when we see the inability to attract investment, the hurdles, as Mr. Newhouse explained, sometimes this feels like what we have to get through just to get into the business or to try to continue to do business in the state of California or in the federal government. What are we doing? Are we doing enough to attract to these young farmers? And when they see what we're dealing with, what their parents are dealing with, what their neighbors are dealing with, what do we need to do different to be able to attract the next generation to continue or at least try to enter into this world of agriculture, ranching, and play a role in trying to protect this beautiful state that we have?
Yeah, I think the younger generation, we see, our parents and grandparents dealing with regulation. We're being over-regulated to death, and it's killing our economies and the industry. The forest is a great example, like we talked about, is all the sawmills have gone except for the guys that have private land, and no one's going to build a sawmill to take lumber out of our National Forest Service unless they can get contracts with the Forest Service, the federal government, to produce lumber out of that. So, I think that's the biggest challenge is, the regulation and lack of knowing tomorrow from our government.
And Dr. Daly, I think you're 4th generation?
Fifth.
Is your 5th?
Yes.
So your next generation, are they going to follow in your footsteps?
I have one back on the ranch who probably questions, he's probably glad I'm here today. That's easier after he finished university. And I have a daughter who's a veterinarian and youngest one back from the Army deciding what to do. But this idea of it's always been difficult in agriculture. I don't think that that's changed. I think there's still a lot of people committed and wanting to do so. Frankly, it's capital as much as it is regulation. It's both, which makes it extremely challenging for young people to become engaged. And then if you're not smart enough to have only one child, and you have 3, there's a complexity of transitioning and legacy planning, which is an entirely different question as you move to the next level.
Well, my family farms in the Central Valley, and that's one of the things that we struggle with. We see consolidation everywhere. And one of the things I always like to point out to my friends across the aisle is the amount of regulation, the amount of bureaucratic red tape. You've got these farmers, you've got these business owners who just can't deal with it anymore, and they end up selling out. And the guys that get bigger are the ones that can afford to hire the consultants, the attorneys, and all the different folks to get them across all those different types of whatever permit or whatever agency they need to deal with. And it's the same thing that's affecting the regulation. It's the same thing that's affecting the investment from the business, but the small farmer just doesn't see that opportunity anymore, and it's just so difficult to push back, and we've got to continue to work on that. And I don't know if you've got any closing ideas while I still have a few seconds.
Well, just one of the things that you mentioned real quickly, the water quality issue, I think is one that we haven't addressed. I'm at Lake Oroville, Lake Shasta, State Water Project, Federal Water Projects. All those dead animals, frankly. All that timber went into Lake Oroville, which goes throughout the state of California. So it's everybody's problem, not just mine.
Well, in my part of California, when we had the devastation with all the water coming in, the flooding that ended up at the lake bottom, a lot of the water came in, brought a lot of debris. Some of it was trees, and some of it, I saw TVs out in the middle of the fields as well, and garbage bags and things like that. But all of that went over the top of the reservoirs on the overflows, went into the canals, and started to create these little mini dams, which then changed the way water was flowing through some of those rivers, and then it would just flood out farms and communities, and I mean, I had entire communities underwater, and it was frustrating to see, and sadly, it's all the same thing. It's regulation restricting us the ability to manage our waterways or our mountains or ranch lands, whatever it may be. And so, Mr. Chairman, again, I'm out of time, so I appreciate the opportunity, and I yield back.